you burdened by the past or are you creating the future? At some point in that journey, what I realized was that I don't exist because of all the circumstances around me. The circumstances exist because of me. So if you truly believe that who you are, truly believe, and then if you say that to the world will conspire to align with you. Because this world is created by you. You're not created by the world. So America has this perpetual relentlessness about progress. And many other countries are looking at it and saying, how do I get that? If you're not misunderstood, you're not doing anything useful. So how do you create profit? How do you go from the noise to something that creates value? We are all prisoners of our own imagination because of memory machine that we are.
Thank you everyone for being here. Welcome to our 11th episode of Effortless. Here with me I have Bipul Sinha, who is a friend, a really dear friend. We've known each other for more than 20 years now.
Absolutely.
2003, right? And it's been 22 years. You know, you hired me at Oracle. This is the year, I think it was June or July. I remember the one thing that's really common between us is Oracle and Larry Ellison. So we'll talk a little bit about Larry. We'll talk about change. We'll talk about, just our lives in the last 20 years. So much has happened.
Indeed.
And of course, all things AI, which is one of the zeitgeists of the valley right now. But welcome, Bipul. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Well, let's take back to 2003. We'll walk down memory lane a little bit. The bubble had crashed. I was in a startup for about almost 3 years. This was a company called Zambiel. We were building file servers and stuff, and we had plowed through a lot of that mess between 2000 and 2003. But then I needed to cool my heels a little bit, learn a little bit of building software at large companies, and that's when Oracle happened. A recruiter had reached out back in the day, and looks like Oracle was on a hiring freeze. You made it happen. Say more about that.
So I was still a young manager, and somebody forwarded me your resume, and when I read through it, I said, this guy has something he's looking for, because he is making all these changes, going from a startup in Austin to Zambiel, and then another startup that was eventually acquired by Brocade. And I was looking at it, looking at your profile, and I was thinking that this guy has something going for him, and I should definitely meet him. And I had no headcount, and I distinctly remember coming down to grab you at the reception. And my first interaction, I typically have a blink reaction for people, and I saw you, and I distinctly remember you were wearing a t-shirt and a jeans pant, and the way you kind of greeted me, and just the energy that you exuded, I always remember that time, because I thought I met somebody who has a drive and charm and charisma, or the combination. And since then I'm a big fan, and obviously the rest is history. But it was Larry's office that made an exception for this hire, and here we are 22 years later.
And I'm so fond of some of those years out there. This is building 400, the iconic building 400, server technologies. Remember? I think Roger Bamford was still the DST vice president and stuff.
Absolutely.
And we had a really good manager too, Amit Ganesh, who really brought the best out in us. And then
Amit was a very special guy. I mean, Amit is a very special guy, but he was a great manager to us. In fact, a lot of things that I learned about hiring great engineers and operationalizing fast and a sense of urgency was instilled in us, in me by Amit. And for so many years later, whenever I see him, I thank him for young engineers and young managers as how to have the sense of operations?
Well, we were probably the two rare managers who were breaking a lot of glass. You remember when we would be called and like, why are you making all these big changes? Because this was a time when IBM and all these companies were competitors in some ways, and the largest customers of Oracle are like, don't make a change, because if you make a change, it destabilizes things. If anything, one of the things I learned from that whole experience, remember there was a Toyota benchmark that we had? And MySQL was beating us left and right on simple inserts. I remember Amit was really not giving up on the laptop. He said, well, I will prove to the world that Oracle can be installed on the laptop, and it was a struggle to the core, right? Because the developer was moving towards the laptop and they found a lightweight thing called MySQL to really run things. And we were taking so much memory and so much CPU for everything. I think the issue of making it lightweight, we'll cover some of that with AI as well.
But that's the power of great companies. If you look at why Oracle is a great company, is because Oracle learned to disrupt itself. And that is the persona of Larry, that not have the burden of the past impede your vision to go forward. And he empowered leaders such as Amit to go take risk and figure out how do we change ourselves to go compete with the new gen platforms, new gen software. And there is a lot to be said about, and this was like 20 plus years ago, a lot to be said about that maniacal drive to improve, to be better and change and change and change. And that's the thing that I carried from Oracle, that this personality of the company that has this long-term vision, and it is relentless.
Yeah. No, in fact, I remember they started the apps business in 1987. 16 years of struggle because it was still a tech company, an infra company. And apps needed UI thinking. Apps needed middleware thinking. We were doing so many things in PL SQL. It was like everything is about the database. Everything, all app code had to run inside the database. It was such a struggle. And then obviously Chuck Phillips comes along as a president, new president, and he's like, we'll start to buy companies. Because the religion before that was, we'll never buy companies. We'll do everything on our own. I just learned that at some level you have to switch your religion 180 degrees. Oracle was one company to have done that really, really well.
Lot to learn from that story. It's been a tremendous part of my personal journey. I spent over 8 years at Oracle, and a lot of like small stories that you look back and say, this is how you connect the dots.
Yeah, in fact, including being lightweight, I don't think we became lightweight enough, because we were running on big honking Sun Solaris servers. The year I joined is the year when we made an overnight flip to Linux as the development environment for all engineers. Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it happened overnight. I'm like, wow, this is the pace at which companies move.
At that scale.
Right? We had thousands of developers and probably $10 billion coming from Oracle database, the revenue itself. But I liked it because I was a Linux guy. I'd come from Zambil, and I'm like, oh man, the Solaris thing is going to be pretty slow. And right in the blink of a moment, we changed to Linux, which was amazing. Of course, Exadata happened. We actually were quite against hardware at Oracle, if you remember. Remember that?
Procuring hardware was a very hard thing to do at Oracle. But this is again the power of thinking, that we were focused on software, but there was a thought that, hey, configuration and managing this software is a hard thing to do. So what if we give customer a solution as opposed to software that goes into a hardware, and then everything has to be optimized and tuned for that hardware, if we can out of the box deliver a solution. And this whole Exadata idea, and before that there was another attempt, but this Exadata idea really kind of pivoted. And in fact, Larry publicly stated that the reason he bought Sun because of the success and what he saw in Exadata. So again, that is the power of like change and not be burdened by the past.
Yeah, in fact, 10 years before that, I remember there was this quote from Andy Mendelsohn, who just retired, by the way, from Oracle.
Wow.
After 40 years.
Amazing.
One has taken over, you know. But he talked about how portability was the biggest asset that Oracle had. They were running on 94 platforms. Remember the fact that we had this portability, and all of a sudden we go from being extremely portable to being extremely unportable in Exadata. And to the point where even in the last 5 years, Azure and GCP are the new things that we are doing at Oracle. But before that, it was all OCI, like, okay, we are not the portable software company. That whole U-turn from being the most portable to being the most unportable was also a big religion change.
Huge. And what is most interesting for me, the portability, was that every startup has to have, or every company, every new company has to have a unique thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that unique thinking has to be controversial and non-consensus, because if 80% of people agree with your idea, then the idea has no merit and you'll never build a big business on it. If you think about going back in 80s and saying that you have one software that runs on every hardware, that was a crazy thinking. Just this idea that you can make it work and be optimized was a crazy thinking, but that was the secret of Oracle's success, and that idea that became mainstream, but that was a controversial big idea. So that's why, like, every startup has to have a belief, and that singular belief of something that is different and that is disagreed by 70% of the people, only 30% of the people has to agree to it, then will only become it a non-consensus idea. And you make that non-consensus thinking mainstream, that's when you create value. And that is the power from the very beginning of Oracle, that every big shift was non-consensus.
I mean, I'm just thinking, had it not been for VOS, the virtual operating system, that made Oracle portable, the Linux transition wouldn't have been as easy. Because, you know, we had a layer of software that would abstract the operating system away from Oracle software. And I'm just like, wow, in a matter of 2 years, because I don't know if you remember, there was a time you and I used to go to Juan and say, why are we losing on Windows? And he's like, guys, like, you know, it is what it is. You know, at some level, Microsoft bundles SQL Server with Windows, and we don't get a chance. Remember that conversation that we had?
Absolutely.
And the fact that we went from big AIX and HPUX and all these big honking Solaris to Linux, to me was about change, like massive change, you know, itself. We also changed our own lives. I mean, you know, lo and behold, in 2009, you graduate and tell us more about the journey right after Oracle.
At Oracle, obviously, I learned a lot about technology and product building and how do you take product to market to some extent. But I realized that I'm not a hardcore engineer. I mean, I do it well, but that's not like my real passion is. I figured that my real passion is business. And I wanted to look at businesses holistically. And with that thinking, I tried to apply for a few jobs outside of engineering. But I always heard that you are an engineer and you need like Wall Street experience or business experience. Then I decided that maybe I need to get that stamp. And that's what led to going to business school. And at some point in that journey, what I realized was that I don't exist because of all the circumstances around me. The circumstances exist because of me. And that thinking about from being outcome of something versus creator of other things really gave me this confidence that you can walk out from a successful career as a mid-level manager at Oracle to go restart the career in venture capital. But that thinking that singularly you are the creator of your own future really transformed.
It's a very powerful thing.
Journey.
I think what you just said, you should repeat it again. I'm not the outcome of my circumstances, but I'm a creator of circumstances. Just a powerful thing, you know. I mean, there's a reason why I'm a fan of you, by the way. You mentioned these things. and you hustled for a year at Bank of America, your first job. Say more about how you bumped into David Blumberg.
So I was doing part-time at Wharton, and I wanted to switch into, again, more of a business role where I would look at business holistically. And I had not thought about venture capital as a career. I knew about venture capital, of course, but I had not thought about it. And
this is the worst time, 2008.
This is
financial crisis.
Really the worst time. And I started looking around, and on Wharton job board, I saw a posting by Blumberg. And I cold called them, and I told them that I'm interested in this job. And there was a lot of discussion because I had no credential being a business guy, let alone being a venture capitalist. They had a lot of concerns whether I would be able to do that job. But again, that belief that you are going to go take this journey and explore and believe to figure it out was tremendous.
You probably your second check. The first check was probably Hootsuite, if I remember correctly. Nutanix, like a couple of $1 million. I think we went on to build Nutanix together for at least another 6 years. And then you started Rubrik about 5 years into the journey or something. Obviously these returns are massive. We kind of returned like $300-400 million for those couple of $1 million. Tell us a little bit about the VC world, like how these black swans and the black swan results actually create this industry and make it possible, and what happens to the long tail, and related to product companies, and what happens to black swan products versus long tail products.
I started to develop a thesis about what makes great companies. And what I concluded was that you need to have a controversial and unique idea about a given market. And it has to be controversial because, again, going back to the consensus, non-consensus, that how do you have a point of view that you let it go in the marketplace and then relentlessly make sure that you make that idea a reality. In some ways, founders have to live in the world of unknown, and then pull the edge of known to themselves. That's when you co-create value. So I remember the partner meeting that we were having at Blumberg. There was a discussion, and also Naval Ravikant was in the room. And the discussion in the room was that the founders never had a successful outcome. They worked at Jambil, didn't work out. They worked at Aster. Aster was not exactly a rocket ship kind of continuously going. And there was a lot of discussion about the Aster architecture and things like that and how market was changing. So there was a question around if these guys had not created successful product, how are they going to create a successful product now? That was the question number one. And the question number two was combining storage and compute in a single software. It was an outrageous idea for that time, for that place. And so if you think about a controversial idea, founders who were unproven and non-consensus, and so the question for me as a lead investor, first investor in Nutanix was, Bipul, what do you think? And this is when you have to singularly think, what is the invariant in the business? And invariant in a business, particularly if structurally it makes sense, are the people. So I told my partners that I don't know the two other guys as well, but I know Dheeraj because I hired him and we worked together, and I know this guy cannot fail, no matter what. And that relentlessness to make this controversial idea a reality requires that level of grit and not taking no for an answer and not failing at all, whatever happens. So you combine the two of controversial idea and relentless founder who will not fail. That's when you go create a black swan outcome.
Yeah, no, I remember, as you said, it was, I think the first polls we did with customers, they're like, these are two buying centers, server and storage, never the twain shall meet. One of them refreshes every 3 years, the other one refreshes every 5 years. One was stateless, one was stateful. How could you really bring this together? And we didn't know virtualization at all. I mean, this was a market and an architecture we had to learn from scratch.
I mean, you had never worked in the infrastructure, nor did I.
Yeah,
We were database.
Yeah,
folk.
absolutely. File servers, databases, and we had never done hardware. So there was a lot of things. But you know what happened was that this notion of empathy, I was getting better and better at it. About being authentic with customers, high quality stuff. I mean, look, Zambil, we were employees number 2025. They were real big senior people sitting on top who were making decisions on product management, which I just didn't agree with. None of us actually agreed with. Some of the engineers coming out of Zambil have created $20-30 billion worth of enterprise value ever since in the last 20 years. But it also mattered what leadership was trying to do. I think looking back at what made Nutanix successful, I would say it was authentic products, authentic customer service. Apple, learning from Apple was a big part of this. Design, basically, like how do you really disrupt competitors with design? I know when you started Rubrik in 2014, there were some of these things that were going on in your head as well. What led you, of course, you moved from Bloomberg to Lightspeed. You were there at Lightspeed for almost 5 years. And then this bug, which was about going and starting something, bit you. Say more on that.
In the 6-7 years that I was in venture capital, one thing that I realized that I have an understanding of what makes a startup team go and build a company. I also fundamentally, and I worked really closely with all my companies that I was involved in, really closely working with you. I remember in the early days, it was just 3 of you and I as a board member, 4 of us, like figuring out who to hire and who are the customers. So all of that experiences told me that ultimate creation happens when the buck stops with you. Because as much as a first investor in Nutanix, I told you that I'm a business builder. I was not. Ultimately, I will give you advice, but you will be the one who will going to go sleep on that problem and get up in the morning and own that problem. Mm-hmm. So I thought that all the entrepreneurs are running and I'm sitting on the sideline clapping. So that was one thinking. And then the second thinking was, if you look back at large successful companies, nobody remembers the funders of Microsoft. Mm-hmm. Everybody remembers the founder of Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So
I love the way you put it, funder versus founder. You know?
And so ultimately I thought, if my career trajectory, if I'm going to create an impact and create something for America that has given me so much, am I going to create an enduring institution? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what would that be? Can I create something that provides employment and career opportunity for hundreds, if not thousands of people? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so would my story end as being the funder of companies as opposed to one idea that I take and whatever happens, I go make it something substantial?
So Rubrik, you start in 2014. It's been a little over 10 years. Were there like 3 phases of this company? Like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3? What was phase 1 like?
I have a fundamental belief that great stories have chapters. Mm-hmm. And even greater stories have chapters where the next chapter has some orientation from the last chapter, but it forgets the last chapter. That's only it reinvents new things. Mm-hmm. So great companies go in phases, mm-hmm. where every phase builds and then forgets, and the next phase starts. If you just look at NVIDIA, if somebody told you that there will be a company that would be a PCI Express card that is doing gaming acceleration competing with ATI, mm-hmm. and one day it will be the biggest AI company in the world and the most valuable company in the world, people will laugh at that idea.
I mean, although that being said, the computing architecture they bet on, which was non-consensus, the opposite of CISC and Intel, was something that has been there for 30 years. Since 1993, they bet on the fact that this architecture is SIMD architecture. It's going to take matrix operations and really make the best out of it. The world is a matrix. They said this from day one, and no pun intended, but the world is a matrix. They said everything is a matrix. That they have stayed with, but the applications, you're absolutely
and
right.
this is where, so the thing is that again, every company has to have foundational value creation, but the application of that value creation has to change. So if you look at Rubrik, what our fundamental value was, that all of the enterprise data is scattered in all of different systems. And then metadata about these data is also kept in a separate set of systems. So backup software has the understanding of application and context and data application connection, which is separate from data that lives in these storage systems. And so our idea was that if you combine the data and metadata together in a single software platform where data becomes self-describing, it will have significant positive impact for the company. Just like NVIDIA bet on this architecture, we bet on this idea that data has to be self-describing. And the first use of self-describing data is going to be the backup. So when we were in the stealth mode, our stealth mode website said world's data management platform. So that was the original idea. We didn't know whether the cyber would emerge or AI will emerge, but fundamentally we had this controversial idea that you combine the data and metadata, make the data self-describing, and that will change how data is thought of in the enterprise. And we have been true to that thinking. So first application of that, the first phase of Rubrik was backup and recovery. The second phase of Rubrik was our fundamental thinking that for the last 30 years in cybersecurity, the world has focused on securing the perimeter, securing the walls and moats so that you don't get to the crown jewel. But you can't prevent the unpreventable. Otherwise, you don't need judges and courts. Police can stop all crimes, or doctors can prevent all disease. You don't need hospitals and surgery, but they exist in the world, which means that as much as you're trying to prevent outside in, you have to do inside out security, protecting your crown jewel.
So cure is important as prevention as well.
And cure comes from understanding of the data, understanding of data user context, understanding of data application context. Again, going back to the original thinking, they metadata and data together. If you build cyber directly into that platform, then you're fundamentally at source level, inside out securing everything. Again, built on this original idea. And then the third phase of Annapurna is again, in the enterprise, you need to have data. Data needs to have integrity and security. That's what we have been doing for 10 years. So again, the same core idea of data, metadata and security together, how do you deliver the next phase? So every business, if you go back to Oracle, database is the same. It became video server, it became internet, it became grid, it became cloud, it became crypto. It's the same underlying fundamental row level locking, fundamental idea of portability. Those things still exist, but apps change it.
Absolutely. How has your developer changed between the first phase and the third phase right now? Tell us more about both the developer and the salesperson. How have they changed?
See, the interesting part is that you do not want to have developers who come from the space where you're going to disrupt their space fundamentally, because
so you need outsiders.
Outsiders. And here's the beautiful part of outsiders. Outsiders are perpetual outsiders. They were outsiders to backup, they're outsider to security, they will be outsider to AI. So there is no need to change your developers. If you truly thought about bringing outsider, so what we did was we focused on getting a top class algorithmic software engineers, not somebody who has done storage or backup. So because we were thinking of taking a fresh
It's
look
first
at
principles. You're saying it's first
it's
principles.
first principles. So there is no need for our developer profile to change. So
No, in
that-
fact, I was going to emphasize the same point as well. But I'm sure they and the ones who are learning fast are the ones who are really carrying the company forward as well. Their emphasis, though, from 10 years ago, when the world was still saying the ABC of cloud, to right now, has anything changed about that?
here is the beautiful thing about a company that has the ambition to be a long lasting company. It's all about, are you burdened by the past or are you creating the future? So this mindset of like whatever has happened has no bearing on what is going to happen, then what happens is that you're telling everybody to learn. And learning doesn't end just the cloud. I don't want anybody to be cloud expert. I don't want anybody to be any expert. Expertise in some ways is dead because the product market fit is dead. Product market fit happens in every 6 to 9 months. So if you get too enamored by what has happened 6 months ago, 9 months ago, then you're not learning because the market is rapidly moving. We are in an age of acceleration. So
Okay, we are back again. So we were talking about the fact that you really need to be balancing not just the past, but not being too much in the future. It's exactly being 2 miles ahead as opposed to 200 miles ahead. And there was a thing that I heard you talk about, which is a beautiful word from our scriptures called Adhogami. So as you think about change, and obviously there's the expansion of the vision, the looking at the second act of the company. First of all, explain to the audience what Adhogami is, and what do you do about it every day to make sure that you don't fall into that trap?
So, as human beings, we are really memory machines. And when we look at something new, we try to go back into our memory and try to map that new thing to something that we have seen in the past. And that process reduces the cognitive dissonance, and you are able to operate on new things based on the past learning. And that's how we have evolved. And what it means is that mind wants an easy answer. It wants to resolve the conflict quickly, and you want an easy answer because that's how you have grown up, and that's how we have evolved from flight, fight, and all the rest. But the issue is that in business, every situation is brand new, and most of these situations have no bearing of the past. Because if you apply the past framework, you will absolutely fail.
Although I'll say that there is something to be said about history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. People say this a lot.
It is true.
And
the issue is there are two things in life. One is about knowledge, and one is about intuition. Knowledge you apply on things that repeat. So like, for example, if you want to go drive to work, if you think from first principles, it'll take you a long time to get to work. So take the map, take the knowledge, what others have done, because this is low risk activity. So there is a value in best practices on a low risk known world practices. But when you are in the unknown world, like creating a business, starting a restaurant, making it successful, there is no blueprint. So you have to apply your intuition. So there is a difference between knowledge and intuition. So everything that happens in the future, you can't apply your knowledge into the future. You have to apply your intuition, your gut feeling, your understanding, your connecting the dot that has not been connected, your unique perspective. But then the issue is that most of us are designed to go back in time because we are a memory machine and map it to the past because that gives us comfort, whether expertise of people. You may have heard of VCs want lots of experience in executives. It's because it gives them comfort. Not that that executive will be successful in this situation because again, memory, mapping, going back in time.
I think maybe what you're saying is that experience without the ability to evolve yourself, because obviously a lot of these people are just not evolving. They're trying to apply a template from the past.
But evolving is where the intuition comes in, where you see things new and try to try to think from first principle without the burden of the past. So what happens is that mind is the Adhogami means it's a downward sloping. It figures out easier path. So what is the easiest thing to do when you encounter a new situation is to map it into the past, as opposed to having the looking at the abyss of you don't know, and now you have to think from first principles as how do I solve this problem. And so this teaching this ability to look into the abyss, and instead of Adhogami, which is the downward sloping and easy answer, how do you become Urdhogami, which is the upward sloping and looking things as they are and thinking from first principles as how do you solve that problem. And how do you teach yourself that, and how do you teach an organization the same things, because organizations in the modern companies that we all operate in, they're no like factory and equipment. It's all people. It's the collection of people. So the collection of collective psyche is what is the company. So if the collective psyche is Adhogami, then the company is relying on the past and not inventing the future, not seeing things evolve, not looking at the abyss and then making the call to be able to go solve those uncertain problems. So how do you teach this as a culture? So
and how do you apply this to like the evolution of Rubrik in the last 3-4 years, especially as it came to portraying the company, selling the product, selling the new product? I mean, because obviously the market has in some ways boxed you into this is the one app that you do, but you're going after the new app. How did you have this narrative in front of your salespeople and your customers and your partners? Tell us more about that transition.
I'll take a philosophical view of this. The philosophical view of this is that the world that exists, that we perceive and see, are your own reaction, your own psychic reaction to the various inputs you get. So the question is that whether you truly believe what you are saying to the world. So if you truly believe that who you are, truly believe, and then if you say that to the world will conspire to align with you, because this world is created by you. You're not created by the world. Going back to the first principles. So do you truly believe that you are this thing that you are saying or you want to be? You are. So if you truly believe, then that's the belief that turns vision into reality or unknown into known. And so your true understanding of who you are without the burden of the past, who you are as a company without the burden of the past, and expressing that vision to the world, and relentlessly working and proving that vision to create that vision into reality. And so it really doesn't matter, and that's why the world is again created by us, where you can become from NVIDIA selling PCI Express card to NVIDIA, the largest AI company, is because there is a true belief that we are AI company in terms of NVIDIA. They must have thought we are the AI company, and we have this vision for the future, and we are relentlessly make this vision into reality.
Fascinating. Obviously a lot of this is about change. We talked about change a little bit, and you've really started to think a little bit about what's happening around us, especially in the Valley, with respect to agentic AI and frameworks of that kind. And one of the things that I feel AI is going to do is to make us lightweight again. It's going to miniaturize our experiences one more time. And we saw disruptions being about miniaturization, in the last 30 years, 40 years actually. I mean, in fact, since time immemorial, it's been about, in tech especially, about miniaturization, going from mainframes to Unix servers to Windows to Linux to laptops to phones. And we can say the same thing about big servers to virtual machines to containers to lambdas. And now we're talking about conversational surfaces, which are actually much smaller than the big graphical UI that we actually saw in front of us. If you had a magic wand and thought about how you're going to disrupt this industry, the cyber industry, good data being at the core. How do conversational services change that sort of paradigm, and will it help in terms of disrupting, being the outsider that you're talking about right now in security? And the reason why I ask is because it looks like the iron is hot. Satya came about and talked about, the app boundaries are going to blur. I mean, if anything, we at DevRev have been talking about it forever. Like, look, the idea of a knowledge graph is you don't have departmental boundaries, because departments are created to organize humans, not to really organize data. And if anything, AI models don't care about departments. They don't care about bureaucracy. They want to be bereft of any bureaucracy. So how do you think about this phenomenon of miniaturization one more time? People are talking about the demise of SaaS. We've talked about demise of SQL and demise of Windows in the last 10, 15 years. How are you balancing these two things, and how does it help you really bring the world of backup and the world of security together?
If you look at the history of technology, if you just look at the computer technology, the story when we talk about centralization and decentralization, or we talk about miniaturization, if you boil everything down, this is the story of simplicity. So in the first generation computer, if we had to interact with computer, we had to do punch card. And then from punch cards to black screen to UI to voice, now you can program computer in natural language. And this AI has brought the simplicity to a point where you don't need to know the computer programming language. You can program the computer by just speaking your natural language, and computer is giving you a response in natural language. So that's the story of simplification. And when the simplification happens at that scale, then that also leads to proliferation of technology. Because now more and more people are finding it accessible to be able to use the technology, harness technology, and gain productivity in their personal, professional life. So my vision is that how do we make products and technology so simple that if you can use Facebook, you should be able to do cyber recovery. Why do we need 30, 20 years of expertise to do complex task? Because the task is complex because of the burden of the past. Because in this new world, when you can program computer in natural language and interact and get an outcome from the computer in natural language, there is no need for having any expertise.
I guess data is or state as we call it, state is the big deal. You talked about the fact that we are securing the pipes. This was about perimeter security. And in the world of AI, looks like if somebody corrupted the data that was used to train the models, you corrupt the models, and models corrupt businesses and humans alike. We have seen this notion of corruption happen with social media in the last 10 years, where all this was subliminal. If anything, you can look at the ad campaigns on Facebook that was changing the electorate and its ability to vote one way or the other was about data, the way data was used to really corrupt people's thinking. What do you think changes about cyber and people's thinking about the fact that data is at the core of all things corruption, breaches, and really malware and spyware going forward?
Again, the way I think about cyber is that as the diffusion of technology is ubiquitous and as the simplification of the technology continues to happen, the surface area of attack is increasing. So it is extremely hard when you have a large surface area of attack to secure every surface. So surface today means the infra, means cloud, laptop, phone, everything. So there's so many ways that you're interacting with the computing paradigm that is very hard to secure all these endpoints. And it's a cat and mouse game. You have to secure it. You have to stop 99% or 99.99% of the attacks, but you cannot protect the unprotectable. So fundamentally everybody has to go and think that what is the core asset that we have in our personal life or businesses for the business It's all about data.
State, it's the memory, it's the
It's
state.
the memory, it's the state that you boil down. So if the thinking is that if we can protect that data and enable that data for secure usage, for both defense from cyber attacks, which is increasingly AI driven, to ensure that your business continues to keep running, to ensure that there is a digital trust. Think about like large countries such as China, India. Digital is a way to deliver healthcare, education. But the person sitting on the other side, if they tap on a mobile app and the app doesn't open or crashes, or if they are not confident that they are talking to a man in the middle as opposed to the service provider, then the digital trust erodes. Digital trust erodes means that you have high transactional cost, which means that the speed of business and speed of economy will go slow down. So essentially, at the end of it, if you boil everything down, the most important asset has to be secure, has to be made available to the right user on the right platform at the right time for the right duration. And if you enable that, then you can deliver better input to AI. And ultimately, AI is powerless unless it has the data and state as you defined it. So if you can direct the right data and right state to this thinking machine that is now thinking like humans in natural language, then it only increases the digital trust, ubiquity of computing, and again, the accessibility of computing across masses. Think about 1.4 billion people in India. If they have access to this immense power in their own language, that's when the world changes.
I mean, you are converging two things like the way we converge compute and storage. You're converging backup recovery with security. You know, it reminds me of Simon Sinek talking about the infinite mindset. And one of the points he mentions in infinite mindset is a worthy rival. So if you think about Rubrik going forward, are you hard charging against a worthy rival, or are you having two rivals now? One in the cyberspace and one in the backup and recovery space?
Look, the way I think about competition is something like this. It's kind of like a pebble on the street. So if you don't pay attention to the pebble on the street and if you just keep walking, then they make you stumble and you fall on your face. You pick the pebble and bring it too close to your eyes, it makes your whole world go blind. So you need to have a perspective and a paranoia, but you can't bring it too close and you can't ignore it. So the way we think about, again, competition is that what are we doing today and who are we competing against? That's number one. And as the market is evolving, and market is always changing, world is always evolving, world is getting new every moment. So in this ever world getting renewed every moment, how is my competitive landscape changing? Who are we competing today? Who are we competing with tomorrow? So that, and this perspective about, if you too focus on the competition of last today, moment, then you miss the competition that will happen tomorrow. That's why perspective is required. So you're not enamored by the past, or also not be super obsessed about the competition of the past, but you can't also ignore them.
And it's basically the springboard, you need the springboard of the past
and
to keep making good money.
Actually, if you look at our capitalist system here in America, and that's what we love and we thrive in, capitalist economy is all about competition. If there is no competition, there is no capitalism.
You're right, absolutely. We're speaking of countries, you spoke about America quite a bit. Let's talk about outside America a little bit. And then we'll get to probably US federal and other things within the country too. But what do you think is happening to 2 or 3 of these crown jewels the last 30 years, where we used to go and sell, like UK, Germany and Japan? Tell us about each of these and dissect a little bit more about where they are today and how are you navigating all this change as well?
I mean, if you look at our country, America, what makes America special is that America has this relentlessness about progress.
I love the word relentless. I think that's what it is. Even what we are seeing with our new president,
It's
there's
all
relentless. Whether it's good or bad, whether you agree, disagree, doesn't matter.
It's all about relentlessness. So America has this perpetual relentlessness about progress. And many other countries are looking at it and saying, how do I get that? If you look at Japan, it's a very large industrial economy. That has to go through digital transformation, reskilling of the workforce, ensuring that the newer people are getting integrated into the workforce, but in a more digital and more software to the new world way. There is a huge task ahead of the government, ahead of the private businesses, that how do they transform themselves to be more digital.
Also, I think, look, it's an aging population, so I think they have to figure out immigration or not, or how do we have, more children, that's one of the big...
Or have the technology that gives them productivity to compensate for the aging population, because the productivity can compensate for it.
Yeah.
So if you look at Germany, we have the same dynamics. It's a huge economy, first world, industrial economy. But the rate of change, if you look at just the electric vehicles and just the digital change that is now on them, and then how do they again forget what made them successful and reinvent themselves in this new digital era, is going to be critical. So that's where the leadership matters, that's where vision matters. If you look at UK, obviously UK made a huge bet with Brexit, saying we'll be on our own, and we have past history and glory of being the trends and being the leading indicator for the world. So how do we make our own path? But for that, they need strong leadership that directs people in a very fearless way, saying that no matter what has happened in the past 5, 10, 20 years, forget that. Let's think from the first principles. How do we chart a course for ourselves? So this is where, again, if you look at this world where we are living in the age of acceleration and every second is new, do you have the fearless leadership and relentlessness about them for change and for taking risk and not trying to manage decline?
Which I think you said some very powerful words about not managing decline, which is Adhogami in some sense.
Natural order is Adhogami.
Yeah, and there is something about the past that you can revel in and keep feeling proud about. But how do you really look at the future? I mean, manufacturing is a big part of both Japan and Germany. And to a large extent, I mean, the idea of services and trading was big about the UK as well. One thing I was talking about it, what is common about these three countries, which I really respect? One is design. Both Japan and Germany are big into essentialism and design. And UK is great at storytelling, if anything.
Communication and services.
Yeah. So it's just incredible how that power needs to really, springboard them into and catapult them into something of the next 10, 15, 20
and
years.
This is where leadership matters, because, somebody has to harness the latent energy and transform the potential energy into kinetic energy. And that transformation of potential into kinetic energy requires singular focus and somebody who says, wake up people, here is the future. And
So what about the buyers? Are you seeing this in the buyers too, like in UK or Germany or Japan? Like, is there a sense of wait and watch in UK, for example, amongst the buyers?
No, I mean, look, here is the best thing about capitalist economy, right? Everybody is on their own. They are thinking. The businesses are forward-looking. They may have inertia in leadership and politics and all of that, but businesses are forward-thinking. They are saying that how do I cross this chasm? How do we ensure that we are relevant for this new world of data, AI and cyber? How do you harness the power of AI to catapult ourselves into the next level? And this is, again, the loosely coupled democratic capitalist system. That is the power. So there is a certain dynamism that latently exists, but for quantum shift, you need leadership.
Well, the reason why I'm asking all this is because for a lot of our viewers, they need to know when to go international. First of all, many of them will say when to go to the US. I mean, they are entrepreneurs in India as well who are like, okay, now I'm building a global product. I need to get to my first market, which is America. And then the question is, when do you go to the second, third, fourth, and fifth? Because these are all large GDPs. At Rubrik, how did you make the decision to go international? And when did you decide to go international?
My thought process was that we are founded in Palo Alto in California. We are obviously an American company, but we saw ourselves as a company that will have global impact headquartered in America. And so do we have a technology that can create multi-market impact?
So finding innovators in global markets
and
fairly early on.
Them started. So in fact, we hired and created our EMEA headquarters pretty much just after the 1.0 version product was released.
Fascinating. I mean, this is again non-consensus thinking. It's contrarian thinking in some sense.
I mean, look, if you want to be a global business, you better be a global business.
You have to start early on. Otherwise, it's really hard. I mean, I'm looking at even going from SMB to mid-market to enterprise. If you don't go early to mid-market and enterprise, you'll never be an enterprise company. I mean, you're seeing that with so many very large businesses. If they started with SMB and startups, at best they can probably get to the mid-market, but you can't go to the enterprise. If you start at mid-market, you have a chance to go to the enterprise.
See, my fundamental thesis about businesses are not built forward execution. Businesses are built backward planning. So every business has to think that 3 years out or 4 years out or 2 years out, whatever is your horizon, where I want to be, what are the critical risk factor I need to solve at that time, and what backward, saying that, hey, a quarter before that event, where I have to be, quarter before where I have to be, quarter before where I have to be. Then you know where you're standing right now. What do I need to do to get to that point? So plan backward and execute forward. But most of the businesses just think forward. As a result, they are not thinking. So if you think any business 3 years down the line, if I have to be a global business, then you can't be sitting here and not doing anything and suddenly become global business.
Part of it reminds me of Jeff Bezos talking about this. He's like, entrepreneurs have to be comfortable to be misunderstood for long durations of time, because that's what really creates the moat.
That's the non-consensus thinking.
Right? If anything, and of course you have to balance the 70-20-10, capital allocation into it. How you say 10 is mine and 70 is the core business and 20 is the middle managers, the people who are really rising through the ranks of the company. Because they need to be on 20 as well. They can't just be on the 70. But the 10 is something that is so controversial, that's so 3 years out that nobody can see around the corner. But you have to be willing to be misunderstood for that 10. Right? I mean, if anything, that's probably one of the big things that you probably have seen.
If you're not misunderstood, you're not doing anything useful. Because think about this way. When I was in VC, I had this thinking that if a space where all the cool kids are going, run as far away from that space. Because there is no value. Because the value is only created when you have a moat, as you said. You have a moat because you are doing something that others don't believe in. Because everybody believes in the same thing, then they are all doing the same thing and the value gets diluted. See, ultimately, every business exists because there is something unique they have to offer. And then to do something unique, it takes time. But market's natural tendency, as we have all studied in economics, is to bring profitability down to zero. So how do you create profit? How do you go from the noise to something that creates value? It requires time. And time only comes from controversial thinking.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. What about US Federal? We all build great businesses. And I remember Nutanix, we built beautiful business in US Federal. And obviously a big chunk of it was great people. These are folks who were disillusioned by VMware and they're like, hey, I want to come really disrupt VMware. It's like, they basically destroyed what they had created at VMware by coming to Nutanix. And I remember looking back at Oracle, I'm like, oh, they built a great business in Federal. Most companies actually skip Federal. They don't even know what it means. We were such controversial companies. I remember the pushback from the board on Federal and going to EMEA early and stuff like that. Tell us more about your current journey, the last 10 years of Federal journey, and where do you think, given all the change that's happening right now with Doge and everything else, how are you folks thinking about Federal?
Look, as an immigrant to America and a new citizen, relatively new, it's been many years, I have a passion for our federal government in terms of helping government how to become more secure, how to become more efficient, use their money the right way and get more ROI. And so I focused on the federal market very early. In fact, I was starting international. We actually started our effort in the federal market. And obviously government, bureaucracy, all of that has a natural tendency towards slowing down, because governments needs consistency needs processes creates bureaucracy, and then things start to slow down. But again, this is the power of America, where the new leadership in Washington is bringing this idea that how do you shake
Status quo
loose? How do you use Doge to reinvigorate the federal government? How do we go back to our founding principles of individual power, individual empowerment? Government is for the people. People are not there for the process and for the structure, but they are there to serve people. And so again, this is creative destruction in some ways.
I found them, by the way, even in 2013, 14, 15, that they were innovators there. People would say they were laggards, but I found US Federal to have really good innovators. If anything, when we went through the subscription transition, in fact, this was an unintended positive effect of subscription, was that selling to government became easier. You know why? Because budgets were taking longer. I mean, they would go on till January and they would have these continuing resolution CRs and things like that. The only thing that they didn't touch was O&M, operations and maintenance, which means a 1-year subscription could easily be approved in the O&M side of things versus CapEx, which is,
look, America became the most important and most powerful country in the world. It's not an accident. Our government has really functioned. I mean, if you look at the things that our government have created, from DARPA to internet to the whole electronics industry. I mean, if you go back to the history of Silicon Valley, the only customer they had was the US government. Nobody else was buying all the semiconductor that Fairchild and others were producing. So there is a rich history of US federal government really spurring the innovation and helping entrepreneurs to kind of being the buyer. And obviously it's about, as the systems get bigger and larger, it requires a little bit of like rethinking. Have our processes become too cumbersome? And every organization has to think that way because of the opposing values of consistency and innovation. But what is interesting is that the folks, as you said, the innovators inside our government are still there. The question is that, are we empowering them enough? Are we, and again, just like you said about the organization 70, 20, 10, enough 20 and 10s, so that we continuously challenging our governments and ourselves and saying, are we innovative enough? Are we changing with the way the world is changing? Because nothing is constant. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backward. So that's the thinking that is going to be very interesting. And I feel like, again, this power of America is about change and relentless ability to change. And we see this like self-correcting mechanism triggering.
Yeah, in fact, I was looking even at 2008, 2009, I mean, like the pace at which we came back compared to Europe, which continued to suffer for very long durations. I'm like, it's all about how fast and how anti-fragile this country is. I mean, the word is anti-fragile.
Exactly.
It is one country. And I think part of it is also because we were always the outsiders, because Europe was the center of the world. And we were like, okay, we are the rebels. We've actually gotten out, and I think ever since World War II.
I mean, if you think about it, America is the original startup against the incumbency of Europe.
And it continues. I mean, and
there
immigration
is this
played a big
insurgent force that is in America, which is all about that we have a perpetual chip on our shoulders, even when we are successful, of like creating and inventing and reinventing. Because again, there are countries based on ethnicity, and there are countries based on ideas.
And the glory of the past, as you said. This whole Adhogami thing is like they are basically sitting on the laurels.
It comes from the collective memory, collective pride. But America is an idea. Idea evolve, and ideas are faster to evolve than collective memory.
Love it. Love the way you said it's an idea as opposed to just a collective memory. One final thing about, I mean, I've seen you read great books. I mean, I come to your home and I see you reading about the Saud family, Al family, and the history of Saudi Arabia, for example. And maybe you were reading about Lawrence of Arabia and all that stuff.
I was fascinated by the history of Saudi Arabia. And again, if you go through the history, what you realize is that it doesn't take too many people to change the course of the history. Like from Genghis Khan to bin Saud, just one person, bin Saud, took like several tribes that had no common ground in terms of like agreeing to something altogether, creating what is today is the 2/3 of the Middle Eastern economy. It's fascinating.
And obviously part of this is about the relentlessness, conviction. What else did you capture from the book that is great for startup founders and people who are really trying to build companies and disrupt incumbencies?
Number one is all about, we are all prisoners of our own imagination because of memory machine that we are. So how do you expand your thinking that you're not limited by time and space? You have this infinite potential to become anything you want, because when you dissociate yourself from the past, then you have this zero and infinite state. Zero because you have nothing, infinite is you have everything to gain. And that's the constant in everybody's thinking, that nobody was enamored by what they had. They were all enamored by where they stood and how much potential that existed in front of them. So breaking our own mental state and stop negotiating with ourselves is the constant in all these stories. And obviously, again, learning too much from the past is also dangerous, because again you are falling back into the memory machine. So how do you go beyond your mind? Because mind is the past. How do you go beyond your mind to look at the abyss and then think from the first principles?
Awesome. This is amazing. And I think we covered so much ground, Paul. And at the same time, I feel like I can keep talking forever about not just culture and technology and shift. I mean, the one thing I see constant in you is change. And that is a very powerful thing. The fact that you embrace change as the only constant in life is what keeps all of us going here as well. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for this opportunity.